Story 1. Never touch the talisman on the door. I moved into that boarding house on a rainy afternoon at the end of August. The alley leading to the place was hidden deep behind a row of old houses. Twisting like fish intestines, moss covered both walls, tangled electric wires hung overhead, and whenever the wind blew, they clattered as if someone were tapping their fingernails against the tin roofs. I rented the room because it was cheap and close to my workplace. I had just quit my old job. My savings were running low, so I only needed a place to sleep. The landlady was a woman in her 60s, nearly all her hair gray, thin but with sharp eyes. She led me down a dark hallway, holding a bunch of keys that jingled loudly. "Room number 7 is still available," she said, "but remember one thing." I turned to her. "What is it?" She stopped in front of an old wooden door. A yellow talisman, already turning brown with age, was stuck on the door. The edges curled from the dampness. Strange red symbols were drawn across it, neither Chinese characters nor anything recognizable. In the middle of the talisman was a dark black stain that looked like a burned handprint. The landlady lowered her voice. "Never touch the talisman on the door." I chuckled lightly, thinking she was superstitious. "Yes, ma'am, I won't touch it." She stared directly into my eyes, her voice colder now. "It's not about tearing it. You must not touch it. Even if it falls, even if it peels off, even if someone tells you to remove it, never touch it." A chill crept down my spine, but I nodded anyway. On the first night in room number 7, I slept badly. The room was tiny, the walls stained with moisture. Whenever I turned off the lights, I could hear water dripping somewhere, one drop at a time, very steadily. At first I thought it was the bathroom faucet, but everything was dry when I checked. I lay down and pulled the blanket up to my chest. Around 3 in the morning, I heard knocking on the door. Knock, knock, knock. 3 very soft knocks. I opened my eyes. Silence outside. I thought it was just the wind shaking the door, but a few seconds later, the knocking came again. Knock, knock, knock. This time it was clearer. I sat up and stared at the door. No shadow appeared beneath it. No hallway light. I called out, "Who's there?" No answer. I climbed out of bed and slowly approached the door. Just as I reached for the handle, I suddenly noticed the talisman. The talisman had been attached outside the door, but somehow I could see its shadow clearly on the inside surface of the wood. A faint yellow patch appeared through the door as though it were soaking through the wood itself. I pulled my hand back. The knocking stopped immediately. The next morning, I asked the landlady about it. She was sweeping the yard. When she heard my story, her face turned pale. "You didn't open the door, did you?" "No." "You didn't touch the talisman?" "No." She let out a quiet breath. "Then you're lucky." I asked if something had happened in that room before. She did not answer immediately, only stared up toward the second floor where room number 7 stood at the end of the hallway. After a while, she said, "The tenant before you asked the same question." "And then?" She lowered her eyes and swept trash into the dustpan. "He didn't listen." I kept asking, but she said nothing more. From that day on, I started paying attention to the talisman. During the day it looked like nothing more than an old piece of paper. But the deeper the night became, the darker the red ink looked, almost like dried blood. One night, returning home late, I noticed the talisman swelling slightly, as if something underneath it was breathing. I froze. When I blinked again, it was flat like before. A week later, the strange events became worse. Every night, exactly at 3 in the morning, someone knocked on the door. 3 knocks. Knock, knock, knock. Then came the voice of a woman. "Open the door for me." Her voice was faint and hoarse, as though coming from a throat soaked in water for too long. I did not dare answer. On the second night, the voice returned. "I'm so cold." On the third night, "Just remove the talisman." I buried myself under the blanket, my heart pounding painfully in my chest. I told myself it was only hallucinations caused by stress. But the next morning, when I opened the door to go to work, I saw wet footprints on the concrete floor outside my room. They stopped right in front of my door. The toes pointed inward. I became so frightened that I wanted to move out immediately. But I had already paid a 3-month deposit. The landlady also said she would not return the money if I left early. So I endured it, sleeping with the light on and music playing softly at night to drown out the knocking. But the knocking pierced through every sound. Then one evening, I met Hung, the tenant in room number 5. Hung was around 30, working as a night security guard. He saw me smoking in the yard, looking exhausted, and asked, "You're staying in room 7, right?" I nodded. He stayed silent for a moment before saying, "Don't touch the talisman." I looked at him. "You know something?" Hung took a long drag from his cigarette. "There used to be a girl renting that room. Her name was Lan. She lived alone, quiet, but every night people heard her arguing with someone inside the room." "With who?" "No idea. Every time people asked, she said there was nobody there." Hung lowered his voice. "One day she told me there was someone standing outside her door every night, begging to come in. That person said if she removed the talisman, she would never be lonely again." I felt my hands grow cold. "So she really removed it?" Hung looked away. "Yes." "What happened after that?" 3 days later, they found her dead in the room, but not on the bed." I swallowed hard. "Where?" Hung pointed toward the door of room 7. "She was hanging on the inside of the door. Both hands pressed exactly where the talisman was outside. All 10 fingertips burned black. That night, I did not sleep. I sat on the bed staring at the door. The room light stayed on. My phone ready with the landlady's number. At exactly 3 in the morning, the knocking returned. Knock, knock, knock. I held my breath. The woman's voice spoke again. "You heard the story, didn't you?" I froze. "Don't believe them." Outside the door came the slow scratching of fingernails. Scrape. Scrape. The thing trapped isn't me. I spun around. The room behind me was empty. But in the small mirror beside the wardrobe, I saw the figure of a woman standing behind me. Long hair, head lowered. I screamed and turned around. No one there. The voice outside whispered, "Remove the talisman, then run." I felt myself losing my mind. If the talisman really trapped something outside, how did it know what I was thinking? But if it was trapping something inside the room, then what exactly had I been sleeping with every night? I called the landlady. No answer. I called Hung. His phone was unreachable. The knocking became violent banging. Bang. 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 The door shook violently. The talisman outside fluttered loudly, though I could not see it. The room lights flickered non-stop. A burning smell filled the room, like burning hair. I backed into the corner. Suddenly black water began leaking beneath the door, thick like mud, carrying strands of long hair. From that puddle, a pale hand slowly crawled through the gap. Not from outside coming in, but from inside the room crawling toward the door. I looked under the bed. Someone was lying there. A woman's distorted face, gray skin, eyes wide open staring at me. Her mouth sewn shut with red thread. All 10 fingertips burned black. She crawled out slowly. I stopped thinking completely. I lunged toward the door and unlocked it with trembling hands. The moment I touched the handle, the voice outside screamed, "Don't open it." But it was too late. The door burst open. The hallway outside was pitch black. No one there. Only the talisman hanging half peeled from the door. It swayed gently in the wind, nearly falling off. In the middle of it, the black stain had become a clear handprint. Behind me, the crawling sound grew closer. I stared at the talisman. All I had to do was stick it back. All I had to do was touch it. I raised my hand. The instant my fingers touched the paper, freezing cold shot through my bones. Countless whispers exploded beside my ears. "A replacement has been made." I fainted. When I woke up, I was lying in the yard downstairs, surrounded by the landlady and several tenants. She looked at me with both fear and pity. I asked, "The talisman, is it still there?" Nobody answered. I rushed upstairs. The door of room 7 was closed. A brand new yellow talisman was attached to it, the red ink fresh as though just written. But what froze my blood was the black stain in the center. Exactly the shape of my hand. I moved out that same day, leaving all my belongings behind. Months later, Hung called me. His voice was very quiet. "There's a new tenant in room 7. I do not know why I asked. And? Hung stayed silent for a long time. He says every night someone knocks on his door. I was about to hang up when Hung continued. He says the voice outside sounds like yours. I stood frozen. That night, when I returned to my new apartment, there was a yellow piece of paper lying beneath my door. An old talisman. Its edges damp. In the center was a burned black handprint. And from behind my own closed apartment door came the sound of knocking. Knock. 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 Story 2. The woman who pasted talismans at midnight. The village where I lived sat beside the edge of a forest, nearly 20 kilometers from the nearest town. During the day it was peaceful. Children ran along the red dirt roads. Adults worked in the fields until sunset. But once night fell, every house shut its doors tightly. No one wandered outside after midnight. The elders in the village often said, "If you hear someone pasting paper on your door at midnight, never open your eyes and look." When I was younger, I thought it was only a story used to scare children. Until the year I turned 26. That year my mother became seriously ill. The doctors said she needed long-term treatment in the city hospital. I quit my job in Saigon and returned to my hometown to care for her. During the day I took her to the hospital. At night I stayed in our old family house at the far end of the village. The house was over 40 years old. The tiled roof hung low, and the wooden walls had rotted in several places. A massive jackfruit tree stood in front of the house. People in the village claimed something unclean lived beneath its roots. But my father had never believed in superstition and built the house there anyway. On the first night after I returned, my grandmother pulled me aside and warned me. "If you hear someone pasting talismans on the door at midnight, don't look." I laughed. "Grandma, nobody believes those things anymore." She gripped my hand tightly. Her old eyes trembled. "It's not about believing, it already happened before." I asked no more questions. For about a week, everything remained normal. Then came the rainy night at the beginning of the month. That evening my mother went to sleep early after taking her medicine. I lay in the outer room scrolling through my phone while rain hammered against the roof tiles. Around 1 in the morning, the electricity in the village went out. The entire house sank into darkness. I turned on my phone flashlight, about to look for candles, when dogs suddenly began barking outside. Not just one dog. Every dog in the village barked at the same time. The barking continued for several seconds, then abruptly stopped. The silence afterward was so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. Then came the sound of slippers dragging across the yard. Scrape. 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 Someone was walking around the house. At first I assumed it was a villager caught in the rain. But the footsteps did not leave. They stopped right in front of the main door. A moment later. Slap. Like paper being pasted onto wood. Slap. Another one. Slap. Each sound slow and deliberate. I remembered my grandmother's warning. A freezing sensation crawled down my spine. Outside, a woman began laughing softly. Heh, heh. An old woman's laugh, broken and wheezing like someone struggling to breathe. I pulled the blanket over myself and squeezed my eyes shut. But then the woman's voice rose from directly outside the door. "This house still has living people." My eyes snapped open. A wrinkled hand suddenly slipped through the window gap. The skin was shriveled, the fingernails long and black. The hand groped along the wooden wall as if searching for something. I recoiled in terror. The woman spoke again. "Let me in." I did not dare answer. A few minutes later, the dragging footsteps slowly moved away. Scrape. 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 Until they completely disappeared. The next morning, I opened the door and froze. 3 yellow talismans were attached to the door. Each one was written in red ink so dark it resembled dried blood. Most horrifying of all, each talisman bore a black handprint at the lower corner. My mother turned pale the moment she saw them. She immediately lit incense at the entrance and pulled me back inside. "Did you look outside last night?" "No." Did you answer it? No. My mother let out a relieved breath. But my grandmother sat silently for a very long time. Only around noon did she finally tell me the old story. Years ago, there had been a widow in the village named Nam Lan. She lived alone near the forest and specialized in making charms and talismans to cure illnesses. Rumors spread that she practiced dark magic and raised door spirits. Anyone seeking her help had to bring her strands of hair or nail clippings. One year, children in the village began disappearing. The villagers suspected Nam Lan was using them for rituals. So one night they stormed her house. But when they broke the door down, they found her already dead, her dried corpse sitting before an altar like a mummy. The strange thing was that every door inside her house had yellow talismans attached to it. And on the outside of the main door were exactly 3 black handprints. After that night, people in the village began hearing the sound of paper being pasted onto doors at midnight. Any household that opened the door or removed the talismans would later have someone die. The dead were often found lying in front of their homes, mouths stuffed with mud, eyes wide open as if they had seen something unimaginably terrifying before dying. Even after hearing the story, I still did not fully believe it. Until the third night. Around 2 in the morning, I woke up to the sound of rattling outside. I opened my eyes slightly. Someone was standing in front of the window. It was an old woman wearing a faded brown shirt, her silver hair hanging loose over most of her face. She was so thin she looked like a skeleton wrapped in skin. The most horrifying thing was that she stood with her back facing the house. But her face was twisted backward, staring directly inside. Her eyes were pure white. Her mouth stretched into a wide smile. I froze completely. She raised her hand. In it was a rain-soaked yellow talisman. Slap! The talisman stuck to the glass window, right beside my face. I screamed and stumbled backward. My mother woke up and rushed out. By the time she lit the oil lamp, the old woman outside had vanished. But the talisman remained. My mother trembled as she burned incense and muttered prayers under her breath. My grandmother sat in the corner, pale as death. "This is bad," she whispered. "It has seen Nam." From that day on, nightmares began tormenting me. Every night I dreamed of standing before a house covered in yellow talismans. Someone inside continuously pounded on the door, begging for help. But the moment I touched the door, hundreds of black hands reached out through the cracks and grabbed me. Every morning I woke to find black burn-like marks appearing on my arms. My mother panicked and brought me to an old ritual master at the edge of the village. He examined my hands for a long time before asking, "Did you look directly at it that night?" I nodded. The old man sighed. "It chose you." "What does that mean?" "The people it sees become the next ones to paste the talismans." I laughed nervously, assuming he was trying to frighten me. But my smile vanished when he rolled up my sleeve. From my wrist to my elbow stretched black markings identical to the symbols written on the talismans. 7 days from now, he said quietly, "If these marks are not removed, you will no longer be human." That night I did not dare sleep. Around 3 in the morning, I heard paper rustling inside my room. I turned. A yellow talisman had appeared on the wall beside my bed. Then another. Slap. Slap. The talismans attached themselves one after another as though invisible hands were placing them there. I jumped up in terror. From the corner of the room came an old woman's laugh. Heh, heh. The old woman stood within the darkness. This time I could clearly see her face. Her skin wrinkled like rotten bark, her cloudy white eyes lacking pupils. Her mouth stretched unnaturally wide, almost torn to her ears. In the center of her forehead was a deep black hole leaking water. She held out a stack of yellow talismans. "Your turn." I bolted toward the door, but the main entrance would not open. The entire door had become covered in talismans. Hundreds of them. Laughter echoed throughout the house. Then from outside came the sound of slippers dragging. Not one pair. Many. Scrape. 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 I looked through the crack in the door. The yard was filled with shadowy figures standing motionless in the rain. Every one of them had talismans pasted over their faces. All of them slowly turned toward my house. At that exact moment, the old woman behind me placed her hand on my shoulder. Freezing cold. "Come with me." I screamed and struggled away. In my panic, I grabbed the oil lamp and hurled it against the wall. Flames exploded instantly. The talismans ignited violently. Horrific screams erupted throughout the house, sharp enough to split my ears. The old woman shrieked in agony. Her face began cracking apart like burning paper. I dragged my mother and grandmother out of the house. Once outside, I turned back. Within the blazing red fire, I could see dozens of shadowy figures standing motionless inside the burning house. All of them stared directly at me. Yellow talismans soaked in blood covered their faces. The house burned completely to the ground. After that night, I took my mother away from the village. Everything seemed over. Until nearly a year later. One rainy night, I returned home from work to my apartment in the city. When I reached my door, I noticed something yellow hanging from the handle. An old talisman. Soaked through. A black handprint stained the lower corner. And from the far end of the apartment hallway came the familiar sound of slippers dragging. Scrape. 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 Story 3. The Door with the Forbidden Talisman. That year I worked as a delivery driver for an electronics company. The job lasted from early morning until late at night. The pay was not high, but it was stable, because I often delivered to remote areas. I heard all kinds of strange stories. Houses where people had hanged themselves. Customers who died unnoticed for days. Abandoned villas that still had lights glowing at midnight. But I never believed in ghosts. Until the delivery trip to Tan Fu District. That afternoon heavy rain began pouring before sunset. I and another worker named Fuck received an order to deliver a refrigerator to a house near the old hills outside town. The address was written vaguely. The last house on the stone road, beside the spirit shrine. The moment Fuck read the address, he frowned. "Maybe we should deliver it tomorrow instead." "Why?" "I heard that area isn't clean." I laughed. "If it pays, it's clean enough." Even so, as we drove along the muddy road toward the hills, I began feeling uneasy. Rain had turned the road slippery. Trees crowded both sides, their branches striking the truck with loud smacks as though something was following us. Nearly 30 minutes later, we finally saw the house. It was a large old wooden house. The roof tiles were black with moss, and every window was sealed shut with wooden boards. In front stood a dried-up well and a half-collapsed shrine. What caught my attention most was the main door. It was covered in yellow talismans. Not one or two. Dozens layered on top of each other. Some were new, some nearly rotten, but all were written with dark red ink resembling dried blood. Fuck froze. "You see now?" I forced myself to stay calm and called out. "Anyone here to receive the delivery?" After a while, a second-floor window opened. A woman around 40 appeared. She wore an old black dress, her hair tied neatly behind her head, her face unnaturally pale. She stared down at us before saying, "Leave it in the yard. We need a signature," I replied. The woman remained silent for several seconds before slowly walking downstairs. As she approached, I noticed her eyes were bloodshot as if she had not slept in days. Her thin fingers held an oil lamp despite the fact that night had not fully fallen yet. She signed the paper quickly, then suddenly asked, "Do you believe in talismans?" I smiled. "Not really." She looked directly at me, then never opened the door with the talisman at the end of the second-floor hallway. Before I could ask another question, she turned away. Right before entering the house, she paused briefly. "If the rain becomes heavy tonight, no matter what you hear, don't come back." By then the rain had already intensified. Our truck suddenly died the moment we tried leaving. I turned the ignition several times but the engine would not start. There was no phone signal either. Fuck turned pale. "Maybe we should stay here for the night." I did not want to, but darkness fell too quickly. The dirt road had become a swamp. Walking back to town was impossible. The woman agreed to let us stay one night. She led us upstairs. The hallway was long and dark, thick with the smell of mildew. Weak yellow lights flickered overhead. At the very end of the corridor stood a dark red wooden door. A single talisman larger than all the others was attached to it. The red ink still looked fresh. Beneath the door stretched a black stain, as if something heavy had once been dragged inside. The woman pointed toward it. "That is the forbidden door." Her voice was barely audible. "Do not go near it." I nodded. But as we passed, I heard sounds coming from inside. Knock. Knock. As though someone lightly tapped from the other side. Fuck grabbed my arm tightly. "Let's go." That night we slept in the first room near the hallway entrance. Around 2 in the morning, I woke up to footsteps. Clop. Scrape. Clop. Scrape. Someone was walking outside in the corridor. At first I thought it was the woman, but the footsteps sounded strange. Uneven. One foot dragging. One foot stomping heavily. Clop. Scrape. Clop. Scrape. I opened the door slightly and peeked outside. The hallway was dark. But at the far end, the forbidden door stood slightly open. I clearly remembered it being shut before we slept. A freezing wind swept through the corridor, carrying the rotten smell of blood. From the crack beneath the door, thick black liquid slowly flowed across the floor. I was about to shut my door again when I heard whispering. "Help me." A woman's voice. Very weak. "I'm trapped." I froze. The voice continued. "Please remove the talisman." I turned to wake Fuck. But his bed was empty. The room door stood ajar. "Fuck?" No answer. I stepped into the hallway. The whisper came again. It already took the other one. My heart pounded violently. When I approached the red door, I saw Fuck standing before it. His back facing me. Both hands trembling as they reached toward the talisman. "Fuck!" I shouted. He turned around slowly. His face was ghostly pale. Eyes rolled upward. "There's someone inside," he whispered. "We have to save them." I grabbed his arm. "Are you crazy?" She warned us. But at that exact moment, violent pounding erupted from inside the room. Bang! The entire hallway shook. The woman's voice inside burst into sobs. "It's coming out, help me." Fuck stared at me in panic. "You hear that? Someone's really in there." Then he ripped the talisman off the door. The instant the talisman fell, every light in the hallway went out. A long sigh emerged from behind the door. Very close. Creak. The door slowly opened. Darkness filled the room beyond. All I could smell was the stench of rotting corpses. Fuck stepped backward. "What the hell?" From inside the darkness came the sound of fingernails scraping across the floor. Scratch. Scratch. Then something crawled out. At first I thought it was human. But it wasn't. It had the shape of a skinny woman. Long hair covering her face. Arms so long they supported her body like spider legs. Her skin was pale and smeared with black blood. Most horrifying of all, yellow talismans covered her face. Dozens of them. Each time she crawled, the talismans trembled violently as though trying to hold something inside. Fuck screamed and ran. The creature lunged after him. It crawled impossibly fast. Bang! I saw Fuck fall onto the hallway floor. The creature pounced onto him. Bones cracked one after another. Crack! Crack! Fuck screamed in unimaginable agony. I panicked and ran downstairs. The woman stood in the living room holding burning incense sticks. She looked at me with despair in her eyes. "You opened the door? What is that thing?" She did not answer immediately. From the upstairs hallway came dragging footsteps. Clop. Scrape. Clop. Scrape. The creature was descending the stairs. The woman's voice trembled. "My husband." Cold terror shot through me. She explained that years ago her husband practiced talisman rituals. He used corpses to raise a corpse guardian spirit. But the ritual failed. What he summoned possessed his own body instead. To keep it imprisoned, she had sealed the room with talismans for 10 years. No one was allowed to open it. She burst into tears. No one was allowed to touch the talisman. The dragging sounds grew closer. I looked toward the staircase. A pale hand appeared first. Then long wet black hair. The creature crawled down like a giant spider. The talismans covering its face began peeling away one by one. With every talisman that fell, more of the face underneath became visible. It was no longer human. Its skin had split apart down to the neck. Its mouth stretched unnaturally wide, filled with sharp black teeth. The woman knelt down, sliced her palm with a knife, and smeared blood across the last talisman. She screamed, "Run!" Then she threw herself onto the creature. I fled the house while horrifying screams echoed behind me. Rain poured down. I slipped repeatedly on the muddy road. When I turned back one last time, I saw the second floor glowing bright red with fire. A shadowy figure stood at the window watching me, its face covered in yellow talismans. The next morning, villagers found me unconscious beside the road. The house on the hill had burned completely to ashes. The woman's body was never found. Neither was Fuchs. Only one thing remained untouched in the ashes: a scorched yellow talisman. In the center was a fresh black handprint. I quit my job after that. Years passed. I tried to forget everything. Until one rainy night recently. Someone knocked on my apartment door at 2 in the morning. Knock. 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 I looked through the peephole. Fuchs stood outside. His clothes torn apart. His face pale as death. He stared at me silently, then slowly raised his hand. His face was completely covered in yellow talismans. Story 4. The talisman beneath the altar in the new house. I bought that house for an unbelievably cheap price. It stood in a newly developed neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. About 30 minutes from downtown. The house had 2 floors, was still relatively new, fully furnished, with a spacious yard, yet the selling price was less than half the market value. Everyone told me I was lucky. Only the real estate agent behaved strangely. The day he showed me the house, he kept checking his watch as though he wanted to leave as quickly as possible. After we signed the paperwork, he even asked, "Are you really planning to move in right away?" I laughed. Why else would I buy it? The agent remained silent for a few seconds before speaking quietly. "If you see a talisman beneath the altar, don't touch it." I thought he was joking. A new house with talismans? The agent did not answer. He got into his car and left immediately, as though he did not want to spend another second near the house. At the time, I thought nothing of it. Until my first night there. I lived alone. After my divorce, I wanted somewhere quiet to begin again. The house was large but strangely cold. Even the sound of my own footsteps echoed through the hallway, making the emptiness feel heavier. Around 10 at night, I began cleaning the altar room on the second floor. The altar was made of red wood and covered with a thin layer of dust. Only a few old incense sticks and an empty photo frame remained. I was about to wipe it clean when I noticed something yellow attached beneath the altar table. A talisman. It had been pasted upside down under the altar as if someone intentionally hid it there. Strange red symbols covered its surface. In the center was a black circular mark like a burn. I suddenly remembered the real estate agent's warning. "Don't touch it." I stared at it for a few seconds, then laughed. Just superstition. I reached up and ripped the talisman off. The instant it separated from the wood, every light in the house went out. Click. The entire house sank into darkness. I froze for several seconds before turning on my phone flashlight. Somehow the air had become freezing cold. Not the cold of air conditioning or night wind, but the cold of a morgue. Then a sound came from downstairs. Knock. 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 Like bare feet stepping slowly across the tiled floor. I swallowed hard. Probably a stray cat. But the footsteps stopped directly beneath the staircase. Then a woman's voice floated upward from below. "Please, put the talisman back?" A chill shot down my spine. Her voice was weak and hoarse, like someone who had cried for days without rest. I shined the flashlight down the staircase. No one was there. I tried convincing myself I was only imagining things from stress. After a while, The electricity came back on. I crumpled the talisman into my hand, intending to throw it away. But when I opened my palm, the talisman was gone. That night, sounds echoed throughout the house. Chairs scraping downstairs. Cabinet doors opening and closing. Water running in the bathroom even though every faucet was shut tight. Around 3 in the morning, I woke because someone was standing outside my bedroom. I could hear breathing. Huff. Wheeze. Heavy and wet. A shadow appeared beneath the crack of the bedroom door. It stood there motionless for a long time. Then the woman's voice whispered again. "You took it away?" I did not dare move. Eventually the footsteps slowly retreated. The next morning I checked the downstairs area. Everything looked normal. Except for one thing. A yellow talisman sat in the middle of the dining table. I picked it up and immediately recognized it. It was the exact talisman I had thrown away. But this time, a small black handprint had appeared in the center, as though made by a child. For the first time, I truly felt afraid. That afternoon I visited the neighbor across the street and asked about the house. The woman living there turned pale the moment I mentioned it. "You don't know what happened there?" "What happened?" She glanced around nervously before pulling me inside. 3 years earlier, a family had lived in the house, husband, wife, and a 6-year-old daughter. The husband suffered financial ruin and fell deeply into debt. Afterward he became obsessed with superstition, seeking talisman masters to protect his fortune. Soon the neighbors began hearing violent arguments and the cries of a child late at night. Then one stormy evening, the entire family vanished. No bodies were ever found. Only the house remained locked for months. The neighbor lowered her voice. Later, people discovered a ceiling talisman hidden beneath the altar. "Why?" She shook her head. "They said it was meant to imprison something." That night I refused to sleep upstairs. I dragged blankets down to the first-floor sofa and left every light in the house turned on. Around 2 in the morning, the electricity failed again. This time the entire house became pitch black. Immediately afterward, I heard running upstairs. Thump, 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 like the rapid footsteps of a child. Then came laughter. Giggle, giggle, a little girl. The laughter raced along the hallway before stopping at the top of the stairs. I shined my flashlight upward. A little girl stood there. Long hair covered most of her face, and she wore a dirty white dress. Her head hung low, both hands clutched something against her chest. My voice trembled. "Who are you?" She did not answer. Instead, she slowly raised what she held. A crumpled yellow talisman. In the center was the same tiny black handprint. The girl whispered. "Daddy said, never remove it." I froze. Suddenly another figure appeared behind her. A thin woman with bruises around her neck as though she had been strangled. She stood silently behind the child. Her white eyes stared directly at me. "Give it back." The voice rasped hoarsely. I panicked and ran toward the front door. But it would not open. At some point the entire door had become covered with yellow talismans. Dozens of them. Then heavy footsteps began descending from upstairs. Knock, knock, knock. Not the footsteps of a woman or child. The footsteps of a massive man. The sound grew closer and closer. The little girl burst into tears. "Mommy, Daddy's coming down." The woman behind her hugged the child tightly and looked at me in terror. "Put it back, quickly?" Before I could understand, my phone flashlight began flickering. From the darkness of the staircase emerged a man. Or rather, something that had once been a man. He was unnaturally tall, his head nearly touching the ceiling. His face was burned black in patches. His mouth had been split open to both ears. Yellow talismans covered his chest and arms. Every step made the talismans tremble violently. The smell of burning flesh filled the house. The woman screamed. "Hurry!" I remembered the talisman removed from beneath the altar. It still lay on the dining table. The man suddenly charged down the stairs. Bang! The entire house shook. I grabbed the talisman. The moment I touched it, countless whispers exploded beside my ears. Don't let him out. The man let out a horrifying roar and lunged at me with impossible speed. In pure panic, I slammed the talisman onto his forehead. Boom! An icy wind burst through the house. The man froze in place. Every talisman covering his body ignited bright red. His scream became so painful I thought my ears would burst. Then his body began shrinking. His flesh dried and shriveled as though all moisture had been sucked away. Within seconds, he collapsed onto the floor as a charred black corpse. Every light in the house suddenly came back on. The woman and the little girl on the staircase were gone. Only faint sobbing echoed from somewhere inside the walls. I sold the house the following month. I lost a fortune, but I did not care. On the day I returned one last time to collect my belongings, I noticed something sitting on the altar. An old framed photograph. Inside the picture stood a family of 3. The husband, the wife, and the little girl. But what froze my blood was the 4th figure standing behind them. A tall shadow. Its face covered in yellow talismans. And in the corner of the photograph, written in red ink, were the words, "One talisman is still missing." Story 5. The person knocking at 3 a.m. I worked the night shift at an old hotel beside the highway. The hotel was called Min Wei, built sometime in the 1990s. From the outside it looked ordinary enough, but inside it always felt unnaturally gloomy. The hallways were long and narrow, the carpets worn out, and the dim yellow lights constantly flickered as though they were about to die. On my first day, the hotel manager gave me a tour and warned me carefully. If someone knocks on the reception door at 3 in the morning, never open it. I thought he was joking. The reception area has glass doors and security cameras. The manager did not smile. Just remember what I said. Then he handed me a small yellow talisman. Keep it beneath the counter. I looked at the talisman and laughed lightly. Does this hotel have a lot of supernatural stories? The manager stayed silent for a few seconds before replying. There used to be people who didn't believe either. And what happened? He looked toward the dark staircase behind me. You'll hear the story eventually. My first night shift seemed normal. The hotel was quiet, with only a few long-distance drivers renting rooms to sleep overnight. After midnight, the upper floors became nearly silent. Around 3 in the morning, the reception phone rang. Ring. Ring. I answered it. No voice came from the other side. Only breathing. Huff. Wheeze. Then a woman's voice whispered softly. Open the door. I frowned. Who is this? No answer. The call suddenly disconnected. At that exact moment. Knock. A single knock echoed from the hotel's glass entrance door. I turned around. Rain poured heavily outside. A woman stood beneath the awning. Long hair covered her face. Her clothes were soaked through. She stood with her head lowered, completely motionless. Knock. 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 3 slow knocks. I remembered the manager's warning, so I did not open the door. The woman began speaking. Please. Her voice was hoarse, as though her throat had been soaked in water for too long. I'm so cold. I glanced at the security monitor. Strangely, the camera showed nobody standing outside. Yet I could clearly see her through the glass. Fear began creeping over me. The woman slowly raised her head. Her hair parted to both sides. Her face was deathly pale. Her eyes completely black, without any whites. Her purple lips trembled. Let me in. I stepped backward. At that moment, the talisman beneath the counter trembled slightly. I thought I imagined it. But a few seconds later, it truly began shaking, fluttering as though wind blew underneath it. The woman outside suddenly stared directly at the talisman. Her face instantly twisted into something monstrous. Her mouth stretched impossibly wide. The skin on her face cracked apart like rotting paper. Then she slammed herself violently against the glass door. Bang! I jumped in terror. The glass door shook violently. Bang! Bang! The impacts grew harder and harder as though she was trying to break through. I panicked and stumbled deeper into the lobby. Suddenly every light in the hotel went out. Darkness swallowed everything. The banging stopped instantly. Only rain remained. My trembling hand turned on the flashlight of my phone. The beam swept across the glass entrance. Nobody stood outside anymore. But a black handprint stained the glass. Huge. Its fingers unnaturally long. The next morning, I told the manager everything. His face turned pale as he listened. "You didn't open the door, did you?" "No." He let out a relieved breath. Then he told me what had happened 3 years earlier. One stormy night, a woman arrived at the hotel shortly before dawn. The receptionist on duty pitied her and unlocked the door. Security footage captured the woman entering the lobby. But strangely, the glass doors showed no reflection of her body. About 10 minutes later, every camera on the first floor lost signal. The next morning, the receptionist was found dead behind the counter. His eyes wide open. His mouth stuffed with black hair. And on the glass entrance door was a blood-stained yellow talisman. After that night, strange events began happening at exactly 3 in the morning. Even after hearing the story, I still tried convincing myself it was only an exaggerated legend. Until the second week, a group of tourists rented rooms on the 3rd floor. Around 2:30 in the morning, the elevator suddenly began chiming non-stop. Ding! 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 I checked the security cameras. The elevator doors were opening on different floors even though nobody pressed the buttons. Then it stopped at the 3rd floor. The doors slid open. A long-haired woman stepped inside. It was her. Her clothes were still soaked as before. She stood with her back facing the camera. The elevator started descending. 2nd floor. 1st floor. Then it stopped at the lobby. Ding! The elevator doors opened. The inside was empty. Nobody there. At that exact moment. Knock. 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 3 knocks echoed directly behind me. From the employee restroom behind the reception desk. Cold terror flooded my body. That room had been locked for years. The manager once warned me never to enter it. The knocking came again. Knock. 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 Then the woman whispered, "Open it." I stepped backward. But suddenly the hotel intercom rang. "Room 305. I answered it. A young woman cried hysterically on the other end. "Sir, there's someone outside my room." Her voice shook violently. "She keeps knocking." Then I heard the knocking through the phone. Knock. 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 Exactly the same as the one behind me. Suddenly the woman screamed. She got inside. The line went dead. I immediately grabbed the master key and rushed upstairs. The hallway was pitch black. The lights flickered constantly. When I reached room 305, the door stood slightly open. Nobody was inside. Only puddles of water covered the floor as though a soaked corpse had been dragged through the room. On the bathroom mirror, written in black liquid, were the words, "Return the talisman." I spun around. At the end of the hallway, the woman stood there. This time she did not lower her head. Her deathly pale face was fully visible beneath the flickering lights. Her eyes completely black. Her mouth stretched into a smile reaching both ears. She slowly raised one hand. In it was a torn yellow talisman. Mine. I ran. I never heard footsteps behind me. But every time I looked into the mirrors lining the hallway, she appeared closer. Finally I reached the lobby. The manager stood there holding burning incense sticks. He shouted, "Give me the talisman." With trembling hands, I pulled the talisman from beneath the counter. The instant the manager grabbed it, every glass door in the hotel shook violently. Bang! A piercing scream exploded through the lobby. The woman appeared outside the glass entrance again. But this time she was not alone. Dozens of women stood motionless in the rain. All with long hair. All wearing soaked white dresses. All staring directly inside. The manager pasted the talisman onto the glass door and began chanting something like a prayer. The figures outside screamed in agony. Their skin began peeling apart. Black liquid poured from their mouths and eyes. The screams became so unbearable I thought the glass would shatter. Then suddenly, everything stopped. Nobody remained outside. Only the rain continued falling. The manager collapsed onto the floor, pale as paper. He whispered quietly, "They've come back." I quit the job the very next morning. I never returned to that hotel again. But one thing still haunts me to this day. Before leaving, I checked my phone. A video had appeared in my gallery, one I had never recorded. It lasted exactly 3 minutes. In the footage, I was asleep on the reception chair shortly before dawn. Standing directly behind me was a long-haired woman. She stood completely motionless for all 3 minutes. A yellow talisman covered her face. Then, during the final second of the video, she slowly turned toward the camera and smiled.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.